Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video, we're breaking down lanterns. In brightest day, in blackest night, let no spoiler escape my sight. We're off to a bad start there already, I'll admit, but Lanterns is now here as the next step in the DCU. HBO's Lanterns follows veteran Green Lantern Hal Jordan and his trainee Stewart as they're drawn into an intergalactic mystery that all starts on Earth, which I imagine saved a lot on the budget. But this first episode is loaded with Easter eggs and references to the comics, and throughout this video, we'll be breaking it all down. I also want to talk about how this episode sets us up for the rest of the season, and kind of go into some of my theory times about what could be going on. As always though, thank you for clicking this, be sure to hit the thumbs up, and with that out the way, let's get into Lanterns.
Why are you here?
Why else? Vengeance.
Now we start this episode off with a little blast from the past as we meet a young Stewart in 1996. Along with his two brothers, they're watching a 60-minute segment where Hal Jordan is revealing his identity as Green Lantern. However, while John is glued to the screen, his brothers start freaking out that their dad is coming home. And yes, Father of the Year right there! But in this opening, we get a rundown of Hal's backstory, insight to John's as well, but yeah, we kind of learn about how Hal became the Green Lantern. He explains that he first revealed himself 10 years ago when he stopped a meteor from destroying a town called Victoria Falls. Now the first thing I want to point out here is that Hal's Green Lantern costume here seems to be inspired by the suit he wore in the alternate universe Earth 1 storyline. There Hal is an astronaut in the near future and he bases it off his spacesuit, which I like here for the show as well, as a human being a Green Lantern is sort of an extreme version of an astronaut. The story about him revealing himself after stopping a meteor also seems to be a reference to Hal Jordan's first appearance in 1956's Showcase issue 22. There he first reveals himself to the public by stopping a missile from hitting his home in Coast City. During this, the citizens on the ground are seen watching in awe as a mysterious and powerful hero emerges, and it's from this point he becomes a beacon for the people. Hal then tells the world about his history of being an Air Force veteran and also a former test pilot. He's basically following in his father's footsteps, who we learn died during a test flight when Hal was young. Death kind of follows Hal throughout the episode, and him talking about death here somewhat foreshadows the reveal at the end. Hal then looks directly at the camera and we see John still glued to the screen, making it seem like Hal is talking to him directly. He then says he wants people to know that he's just a regular person, and the entire episode is basically a grounded Green Lantern just going about their day. We'll see how John's feelings towards Hal drastically shift as he grows older in just a minute, but I love how they set up this dynamic between John and Hal early on. This shows that at one point, John idolized the character. We then get a quick explanation of what the Green Lanterns are, and Hal says they're basically beat cops who have their own chunk of the galaxy. He's also the first Green Lantern from Earth, and it kind of creates a rivalry between John and Hal later. Hal also mentions that the only question he was asked for the job is if he was afraid, to which he said no. He then explains that after losing a parent so young, there isn't really anything left to be afraid of. Juxtaposing this idea of fear when losing a parent, we then see the fear that the Stewart kids feel around their father, who was actually still alive. The dad pulls up on the driveway, but notice how John doesn't shut off the TV until the very last possible second. This shows how John is already fearless at such a young age and foreshadows his future as one of the most powerful Green Lanterns. However, before that, he's got to take some shit and some shots from his dad as he comes into the room and immediately knows that John was watching the segment on Hal. He asks him if he's going to tell him his real name, and John says, Hal or something, which we know he's lying because the kid was literally about to jump inside the TV. There's no way he forgot his last name, but for some reason he doesn't want to tell his dad, which we will theorize about why that is in just a bit. But we also see that John's dad's in the Marines. Now this is a pretty big change up from the comics where a lot of the time John's dad isn't really mentioned much and he's raised by his mother. This was Shirley Stewart, who along with his sister Ellie died when they were young. We do see John's dad featured in a few issues though, and it seems like he wasn't a great guy, so it seems like they're basing it off that. But that comes from stuff like the recent Green Lantern Corps issue 15, where John's possessed by the fear entity known as Parallax. During this, he sees himself as a kid about to take a beating from his dad. However, DC Comics has also rebooted its comic book universe a few times, and there is a vision of John's origin where his father's in his life, though it never specifies that he's in the military. There though, he is a civil rights activist who's really harsh on John. John's dad in the comics is also named Henry, and while we don't get a first initial on his military uniform, the cast lists him as John Stewart Sr., which is super interesting as well, and I'll talk about why that is in just a moment. We also don't see any sign of John's mum, but we do see in a moment that his dad wears a wedding ring. I'm also pretty sure there's a picture of her sitting on top of the TV. But this makes me think that they're pulling from this older origin of John, where his dad mainly raises him as his mum's dying of cancer. I do feel as well that that will be something that we see with the young John, and it was potentially foreshadowed to us with Hal's line about how every kid's worst fear is losing a parent. John's dad then orders him to go outside, where he sets an apple on his head before pulling out his gun. And whoa, the kid was just watching some TV. You can also see a bunch of bullet holes behind him, showing that this has happened many times before. A really deep detail here as well is that the bullet holes go up the wall in a vertical line, and the last one stops right at John's height. It reminds me a lot of when your parents used to mark your height on the doorframe, and it shows his dad has probably been doing this for a couple of years. It's clearly playing off the story of William Tell, though, who was known for shooting an apple off his son's head. He also assassinated the tyrannical Austrian Duke Albrecht Gessler. Due to the setup here and what we get at the end, I did even wonder if John Stewart Sr. had something to do with Hal's death, especially due to the way it looks like Hal died. John's dad then asks John if he's afraid, and he says, "No sir," as his dad shoots the apple from his head. John doesn't even flinch, and he just calmly walks back up to his dad, who then tussles his hair. He then says, "Let's get a burger," like this was some proud family moment between father and son. Now, I feel like we have to break this down a bit before we move on, because what a way to introduce us to John. Like I said, in the comics, John's dad's barely mentioned, but I feel like this switch in the show is meant to create another layer to Hal and John's relationship. Hal is sort of playing a different type of father figure to John than the brutal one he had growing up, but both are pretty bad. Also, is it just me, or does John Sr. seem to know a little too much about the Green Lanterns? The 60-minute segment said it had been 10 years since Hal first revealed himself as a Green Lantern, and it's very clear that the Stewart house has had conversations about the Emerald Hero before. The kids seem terrified of being caught even watching him on TV, except for little John though, who is cold as ice. The biggest thing, however, is how John's father asks if he's afraid before shooting the apple off his son's head. We know that that's the only requirement to be a Lantern because of the lore around the character and the fact they tell you it during that 60-minute segment. However, John Sr. didn't catch that program. So how would he know about this, and why would he be clearly training John from an early age to not show fear? Well, I'll tell you my theory, yeah? Now, I know that the show literally just started, but John Sr. really has my wheels turning for some theory time. Again, changing his name to John Sr. instead of Henry feels like a very deliberate choice. This makes me think that perhaps John was once a potential recruit for the Lanterns himself, but something prevented him from securing his ring, which I would guess might be due to the loss of his wife. This could have created a fear in him of losing the rest of his children, and this would have prevented him from becoming a Lantern, so now he's training John from a very young age to never have fear so that one day he may be able to take his place in the Corps. The place that should have been his. Now, I know that sounds out there, but it would explain how John Sr. has this inside knowledge of the Lanterns, and him seemingly having some kind of beef with Hal. As weird as it sounds as well, I think John Sr. could actually be playing a version of John Stewart from his early appearance in the 80s. There, John was straight up chosen off the streets by the Guardians to be a replacement for Guy Gardner in Green Lantern issue 87. In the issue, Hal takes John on a mission as part of his training, but the different ways of going about the job make things a bit tense. John uses the ring to embarrass a senator who preaches about white supremacy, but later saves the day by uncovering the senator's plans to fake an assassination attempt and blame it on the black community. The issue then ends with Hal admitting he was wrong about John, and the tagline saying, "He will return at some point." However, after that, John hung around as a backup for Hal and Guy Gardner, and he popped up in a few issues of Justice League during the Infinite Crisis event. However, it wasn't until 1984's Green Lantern issue 182 that John Stewart returned as an official member of the Corps. This is when he was officially given the job by the Guardians after Hal quit the Corps the issue before. So what I'm getting at is that John Stewart Sr. may have been the original Green Lantern who was approached by the Guardians, and he trained with Hal in his first appearance. But John Stewart Jr., who we follow in the show, is John Stewart when he officially gets offered the job in Green Lantern 182. Having John's dad be a Green Lantern that never was, if that is indeed the case, would add a lot of depth to John's growing and rocky relationship with Hal, along with his own motives for wanting to become a Lantern. Now this is, again, a bit of a theory time, but we'll get into the rest of the video after a quick word from our sponsors. Hey guys, so unfortunately, bad news has struck the channel. I am now 38 years old. I am older than I am younger. What? However, I feel way better than ever, and actually feel like I did when I was in my 20s. Having 2 4-year-olds and a dog now is very tough though, especially with how many videos we put out, but I'm busy in a good way. But let's be real, after 30, that natural energy really takes a dive. Your body is still making testosterone, but a lot of it gets locked away by a protein called SHBG. Unfortunately though, your body just can't get to it. That's exactly why I've been using Mars Men, which gives me more energy, sharper focus, stronger lifts, and that steady summer drive day and night. Mars Men uses powerhouse natural ingredients to help you feel better. Those are Tongat Ali, Shilajit, vitamin D, zinc, and boron. They're all clinically dosed, made in the USA, and third-party tested. Helps free up that locked testosterone so you can actually go and use it. Real results, real ingredients, 0 synthetics, and 0 needles as well. Because of this, my workouts are better, I'm lifting more, my recovery's faster, and I've got that consistent energy to enjoy every single sunny day this summer. Thousands of guys are feeling the same as well, and over 91% report higher energy and drive. If you want to smash this summer feeling strong, confident, and unstoppable, then this is it. For a limited summer blast, you can get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts when you go to mengotomars.com. That's mengotomars.com. Grab it, use the link in the description below, get that discount, and when they ask where you heard about it, let them know it was heavy spoilers, yeah, and we can keep bringing you the good stuff. But let's make this your strongest, brightest summer yet. Grab Mars Men down at the link below and get yourself feeling a lot better and much more driven. Thank you. Getting back to the show, we then fade away from a young John to a now fully grown badass John in 2016. If you're keeping up to date with the DCU timeline as well, this would be 9 years before we met Guy Gardner in Superman, which takes place in 2025. John's workout is then cut short when we get a call and we see him getting picked up by Hal. He screeches around the corner while blasting Boogie Shoes by Casey and the Sunshine Band, and though he's late and hungover, and John should be pissed, he just is completely nonchalant and clearly doesn't care. It just shows that he's got a handle on his emotions, and a detail I love here is that John doesn't even put on a seatbelt, which again is playing with the idea that the character has no fear. As Hal then skids out, he continues trying to provoke him, saying how he disappeared for 2 weeks and then showed up with a hangover, which should make John mad, but John refuses to let anything faze him. I also love how even in just this first couple of minutes of seeing John and Hal together, you immediately can tell what kind of relationship this is. And not in a good way. It's clear that Hal is kind of a piece of shit, but you can see how he's subtly testing John constantly. He wants to see if he'll lose his cool, but John is fully aware of this and just wants to get his training done as soon as possible. Also, love this kind of lethal weapon role reversal here, where Hal, who's the older cop, is the impulsive renegade, whereas the younger cop seems more mature and more of an adult. Hal also mentions that the reason he disappeared is because he was off on the planet Farron 4. He calls it a shithole and says he got caught up celebrating after stopping a civil war on the planet. Now this is a reference to 1960s Green Lantern 156 by Mike Barr and Gil Kane. There Hal follows a distress signal to Pharos 4 and finds it's been taken over by a race of shape-shifting insects called the Pharoids. However, it turns out that one of the Pharoids called Green Lantern to help them in their war against another alien race called the Dalgova. Hal eventually brings peace between the two factions by bringing delegates together from each side to fight each other in single combat. It's at this point they then discover that they don't even remember why they're fighting, and Hal makes them sit down and figure out their problems. It's a super niche reference, bringing this up, as it's the only issue featuring that planet, but yeah, I appreciated they touched upon it. However, instead of impressing John, this story just kind of pisses him off. He says that they've been doing this for 2 months now, and he still hasn't even won the ring. To which Hal says, hold on a second, kid, the ring will choose when he's ready, but John claps back, saying the Guardians already chose him. Hal again tries to bring John back down to earth, saying despite the big blue guys thinking he's hot shit, he's nothing but a substitute teacher. Ooh. Now I've got to be honest as well, that would have annoyed me. Hal then decides to give John the chance, tosses the ring, and tells him to meet him at a taco stand up the road. He then jumps out the car as it goes off the cliff in a kind of sink or swim style of training. But this forces John to learn on his feet and use the ring to survive the crash. Now, if we look at the parallels of this and his father, it's kind of playing off how John is always being trained in situations that are literal life and death. We then cut to John walking down the desert road, which is when he calls his dad. There he vents to him about how much of a jerk Hal is and that he tried to kill him. But John Sr. assures him that Hal is just trying to provoke him and that he needs to just breathe in, button down, and be cool. So we see that not only is John Sr. still around, but he's actively involved in John's life and training. John Sr. also mentions how Hal and the other Lanterns are allowed to have tantrums, but they aren't. Now this could potentially be hinting at John Sr. knowing this from experience, along with how he knows Hal's antics are just his way of testing John. John and his father not having the privilege to have tantrums as well also hints at the racial inequality that I think the show will likely be playing upon. There's clear metaphors for immigration later on, and Damon Lindelof was behind Watchmen, which tackled a lot of ideas around race. I do also wonder if they're going to bring race into it more down the line, and how John may be perceived by the public. Now, after getting a little pep talk from Pops, John continues his way down the road, and the ring starts to beep, which is when it materializes Hal, who you can see looks a bit younger. He's not got the grey streaks in his hair, and he panics and asks John if he's dead. This is also foreshadowing the ending, and I think that John will likely get in touch with this consciousness at some point down the line. Initially, John just brushes it off, thinking it's another one of his silly games, but we can see that Hal is genuinely confused. He actually seems like a nice version of the character too, and apologizes if he's done something to annoy him. We then learn that this new Hal is the backup of his consciousness, combined with the sentience of the ring. We also discover that Lanterns are required to upload weekly, however Hal has not been following protocol and hasn't uploaded to it in 10 years. Hal's consciousness is also very surprised that John doesn't know all of this already, saying that he should have taught him these things by now, along with how to fly. So it's clear that Hal wasn't always an arsehole, but something happened over the last 10 years that has turned him away from his responsibilities. We're also getting stuff in 10-year gaps as well, the end of the episode's 2026, and I do think that we're going to go back in time to 2006 and see what happened with Hal when the last time he uploaded his consciousness. In the comics as well, this projection of Hal's consciousness is called an energy twin, but it actually works a bit differently. In the books, a Green Lantern can create an energy twin of themselves that can travel at far greater speeds than that of the ring wielder's physical form. However, while the energy twin is active, the ring wielder remains motionless as their life force is needed to guide them. That definitely isn't the case here though, as Hal is just up the road smashing some tacos. With John unable to fly, Hal's backup gives him the cryptic message.
There's hail in Rushville, Nebraska.
He says that the real Hal will know what it means before he disappears, and Rushville becomes a prominent place in both 2016 and also 2026. We then see as John finally makes it to the taco stand where Hal is living it up as a celebrity superhero. People are taking pictures, hitting the thumbs up and subscribing, and Hal is signing autographs. However, his attitude quickly changes when John gives him the message, and he tells John to pay the bill before flying off. Also, a funny moment here comes when John says he conjured bubble wrap to survive. Now, while this seems a bit silly, I feel like this plays into how John's constructs are typically more practical than most of the other Lanterns. Also, this most likely comes from his inexperience with the ring, as he's never made something purely from his imagination. So his first thought is something totally normal. Now, I couldn't find a specific example of a Green Lantern creating bubble wrap in the comics, but I did find this hilarious comment on Reddit. People are asking, what would you construct? And yeah, this guy says bubble wrap, and I think Damon Lindelof, we have found your burner account. But I do like that they're just two regular guys with regular clothes. However, I'm also starting to think their wardrobe could use an upgrade. Now, if you want to do that to yours, then why not check out our merch store right below the video. We've got a whole host of stuff coming off the back of House of the Dragon, including our Ulf shirt, our Cruel Queen playing card one, our Deli one inspired by Spider-Man Brand New Day, and our Euro Trip one as well. The more you buy as well, the more discounts you get, and it all helps videos like this get made. But John once again is left to find his own way, and we see him travelling out to Rushville. It's a long, drawn out trip with him going through security, which is a lot different to Hal, who can just take off and leave, literally. Finally, he arrives to a massive crime scene at the local high school football field where Hal is waiting for him. He says he was testing John to see if he could find his way there on his own, which is a pretty shit lesson, even for Hal. Like, I'm pretty sure John knows how to book a plane ticket. We're then introduced to the town sheriff, Kerry Kane, who is definitely not a fan of Hal. Now, if you recognise her, then it might be because she was in No Country for Old Men, and I also found out when breaking down the movie that Kelly MacDonald is actually Scottish. Anyway, she basically tells him that he needs to leave, as the Lanterns are only authorized to deal with extraterrestrial crimes. And this is just a regular old Earth shooting. However, Hal is convinced that the victims on the field are alien. He notices that none of the people around seem to know who they are, and no one has taken the bodies. One quick detail I want to bring up here as well is that on the surface, this does seem like it might be the first time that Kerry and Hal have met. However, Kerry does say that she can't do this again. Now, she could just mean having to explain again to Hal how he needs to get the hell out of there and to stop freaking people out, but it also could hint that this isn't her first time dealing with the Lantern bullshit. And we'll be going back to 2006, I swear. Now, while Sheriff Kerry is not happy about it, she sort of gives Hal permission to investigate. I also couldn't really find a good counterpart for Kerry in the comics, but I am thinking that she may be based on a character named Rose Harding. She's a small town girl from Hope Springs, West Virginia, and she and Hal had a brief relationship when he tried to return to a normal life. However, it quickly came to an end when she found out he was a Green Lantern, and Rose was also introduced in the 1990 Green Lantern run. This seems to be like a big inspiration for the show, and it follows an older Hal Jordan 15 years after he first got his ring, and he's basically trying to get back to a somewhat normal life. He ends up going on a road trip across America while John Stewart takes the lead in space and Guy Gardner is recruited as the Green Lantern of the Justice League. However, the author of this run was arrested for some really awful stuff in 2018, which he did go to prison for, so DC pretty much deleted it from existence. I am skirting around the subject, but it is very bad if he's going to prison for it. You can look it up yourself. But yeah, I don't know if they're going to adapt that fully because of how bad the author is. But yeah, Rose looks identical to Kerry here, which is some great casting if that's the case, and I did wonder if that factored into the equation. Hal then gives John another little training exercise and has him give a rundown of what happened. John then surveys the scene and breaks down how everything went down. Hey, that's my job. Noticing the kicking block still on the field and the broken fence, John determines that the home team must have scored a game-winning field goal, which caused the fans to storm the field, and this resulted in 4 members of the visiting side being shot in the commotion. Now, I love how you can see both John and Hal's detective skills here, as Hal, up until now, seems like a pretty shit hero, but here he shows off why he's the Earth's only Green Lantern, and he's basically humouring Sheriff Kane and John because he knows he's right. John then notices one of the victims' sweaters on the field and figures out that one of them must still be there. Hal already knows this and has been watching the suspect the entire time, which is why he's just been there riding the bench. However, unlike Hal, John is a goody two-shoes and says they have to respect the chain of command. So he tells Sheriff Kerry, but it turns out she also knows this and has been watching him. And John coming onto the field has screwed up this whole thing. So the guy bolts. Whoops. And Hal was right again. But this leads to a chase in which John outsmarts him, and though he's got a lot to learn, I also love how we see his military training coming into play here. Also, I think we need to add Aaron Pierre to the list of all-time great on-screen sprinters. You're not as good as Tom Cruise yet, but you might get there one day. The dude is flying. Look at that arm control. But with the alien suspect now in custody, Hal then takes John out for a drink to celebrate. We then see him using his ring to create a $20 bill, and he puts this into the jukebox. Now this is a hilarious and brilliant use of the Green Lantern ring that I never really considered. However, yes, I did find an old issue of Green Lantern where a low-level criminal named Bill Braggett briefly had Hal Jordan's power ring and gained the ability to channel its power. He used it to create fake money, and after getting out of prison in 1969's Green Lantern issue 67, he basically went on to live a life of wealth. The issue also shows the Green Lantern interrogating the fake money using the ring, which is absolutely hilarious. On the jukebox, he also plays the song A Brand New Key by Melanie from her 1971 album Gather Me. Throughout this episode, there's been loads of old songs whenever Hal's been on screen, and I just love this aesthetic. As Hal then orders some drinks, mainly for himself, John then asks him about how he got his ring. Hal then says he got it the old-fashioned way by being chosen, not by doing some lame interview with the Guardians. This is of course a reference to how John became a Green Lantern officially in the comics, and this happened after Hal Jordan quit the Corps, which happened in Green Lantern issue 185. However, John says that maybe he should have interviewed because he's kind of an ass. We then get a sort of extended version of the story Hal told on the news where he says he was woken up by a giant green bubble that asked if he was afraid. When he said no, the bubble flew him hundreds of miles in just 10 seconds. It then took him to Abin Sur, who, as Hal described, was super messed up. He was pink, bald, bleeding all over, and he gave Hal his ring. Using his experience as a fighter pilot, Hal then flew to none other than good old Nebraska, which just so happens to be 20 miles away from Rushville. Meanwhile, while Hal is telling the story, the jukebox once again starts playing Brand New Key, which pisses pretty much everyone off in the bar, but it's a banger. What the hell is going on? How about one guy is ready to throw down, but Hal just ignores him and continues on. Hal then goes on to say that once he put the ring on, he could understand everything the alien said. Now this was, "My name is Abin Sur, responsible for maintaining the peace and sovereignty of Sector 2814. This responsibility is now yours, as the ring has chosen you to be my successor." And then his last words were either good luck or oh fuck. Now, I feel like Hal isn't being entirely truthful here. Though this is pretty much how he got his ring in the comics. In 1959 Showcase issue 22, Abin Sur crash lands in California, and Hal is then taken from Ferris Air Base while working on new flightless trainer crafts. Whew, bit of a mouthful there. But Hal then says that Earth is basically a shithole planet that the Guardians never even took into consideration. They didn't even have it in their jurisdiction, and Hal being chosen was apparently just a fluke. However, this gave him the feeling that Abin Sur's crash was never an accident, so ever since he got the ring, he's been monitoring Rushville for any more alien activity. Now this is why he created the hologram, which is what John calls it. And hey, John's got jokes. Unfortunately, their little bonding sessions interrupted when Brand New Key once again starts playing in the bar, and the guy who yelled at him before says he's gonna kick his ass if the song plays again. But Hal just keeps on ignoring them. We then see that Hal is actually being an asshole on purpose this time, as John realizes he played the same song on the jukebox over and over as he wanted to get in a fight. This is so that he'll get arrested and locked up with the suspect from the football game, so he can slowly start to question him, which John is 100% cool with if it means Hal gets his ass kicked. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. He then gives John his ring and goes over for the fight, which is when John notices a woman at the bar giving him the good old eye shag. She then asks if he's gonna say yes to Hal. John says he doesn't think that Hal wants him to have it and that he's been testing him, and the lady asks how he's being tested. Which, whoa lady, who the hell is you, and why are you asking so many questions? Now, I was thinking, mate, I should be a space cop, yeah, because I was super suspicious about her, but it doesn't seem to set off any alarm bells for rookie John. He then shares a drink with her, shags her outside, which I don't think is protocol, and John also shows off a bit by using the ring to light up a cigarette, which I will say was pretty smooth. Now, am I the only one who thinks this lady's up to something, right? Especially with what we learn later. I mean, let's roll the tape back and hear some of the questions she asks John.
You gonna say yes? Testing you how?
She even calls him a space cop before John tells her he's in training.
Being a space cop. How many trainees does he have? Why'd he pick you?
It's like an interrogation. Also, notice the last thing that John tells her before they go back when she asks what happens after training. Here he says Earth can only have one Green Lantern, so he's being trained in case something happens to Hal. And I think you might have screwed up there, John. That doesn't seem to be like something you should be telling random people you meet in bars. Now let's just say this lady is some kind of ne'er-do-well, and knowing that Earth only has one space cop and his replacement's still in training, that would be a pretty great thing to hear if you're trying to take over the planet. I also love how happy Hal looks here while he's getting arrested after getting beaten across the bar. Like, yes, my plan worked flawlessly. We then cut to the next day where John goes to pick up Hal from the station. The station's named the Sheridan County Sheriff's Office, which is because they are in Sheridan County, obviously. But it could also be a nod to DC writer Tim Sheridan, who wrote 2024's Alan Scott the Green Lantern. We also discover that Sheriff Carey has locked Hal in the broom closet because she knew he had a plan to get arrested. So she decides to make an example of him. She brings him in front of a judge for impeding on her investigation, and I love how Hal is like, "Hey, come on, I'm a Green Lantern. I'm the Joker, baby." Also, you can see the judge's name is Janet Sloan, which could be a super subtle nod to the original Mr. Terrific, aka Terry Sloan. However, despite Hal flashing his Green Lantern status, the judge is not having it until Jason Ritter with a mustache comes to Hal's defense. We learn he's Billy Macon, who is a lawyer that quickly gets Hal out on bail, and he's also the husband of Sheriff Carey. Ooh, and that is gonna be a pretty awkward conversation later. We then see that mustache Jason Ritter is not just a good guy and a Green Lantern fan, but also a typical slimy lawyer. He was sent by his father to bail Hal out and invite him out to his ranch for dinner, which Sheriff Carey is not very happy about. We then see John and Hal arrive there and see that it's not just your average farm, but a full-on compound. It's complete with an armed militia, training grounds, and once there, we meet Kerry and Billy's son Noah, who I only mention because it's the same kid who played Frankie in Spider Noir and also Alex in Weapons. And I love that show and film. Sheriff Kerry also warns Hal that her father-in-law knows all about him and that he's not someone he wants to fuck with. So yeah, it's clear something mischievous is going on here, but I'm super curious to see how Sheriff Kerry fits into all of this. Seems pretty clear that she's not really down with whatever her husband and father-in-law are doing, but she clearly doesn't want Hal's help and is trying everything she can do to get rid of him. I did even get flashes of Lindelof's Watchmen TV show during this, and in that we had a militia group based around Rorschach that were well, I'll not spoil it, but it's something similar. But this doesn't deter Hal at all, and he then goes to meet Billy's daddy William. We learn he was a sniper in the Marines and is disappointed that they didn't look him up. He tells them that despite having a weapon of mass destruction, then walking into unknown territory is either trust or arrogance. And yeah, this guy is definitely a bad guy. We then learn that this isn't even his compound and that he's working on behalf of a mysterious employer, who of course he can't legally talk about or identify. Yep, classic bad guy mystery stuff there. Thinking he's just some doomsday nut job against the government, Hal then tries to shoot him down, but Macon reveals the reason he called them is that he knows all about the aliens. Taking Hal out of the grill, he then says that when Hal revealed himself to the world as a Green Lantern, he realized that Earth was just waiting for some alien species to come and take it. He compares it to how the land they're on right now once belonged to the natives, who were unaware that ships were coming from across the ocean to take it. Realizing that he's dealing with an ancient alien theorist, Hal tries to assure him that he's been all over the galaxy and it's a relatively peaceful place. But Macon says, if that's the case, why do they need space cops? Macon then assures Hal that he's not some crackpot with his head in the sand, but a student of history. Which I feel like exactly what every crackpot conspiracy theorist says. But basically, Macon is convinced that aliens are coming to colonize Earth. I do wonder if this is going to play off Superman as well, as there we learn that the House of L actually had plans for Clark to come and invade, and have a harem of women. He says the guy sitting in Sheriff Kerry's cell is part of an advanced team, but he of course can't disclose how he knows this. Now I did think the subtext was a bit heavy-handed here, especially when he's like, we don't want people on this planet who wasn't born here, we don't take kindly to your kind around here. But I am interested to see how this is going to go over with the internet. The greatest place for nuanced discourse. Meanwhile, John teaches Sheriff Kerry's son to throw a football because the kid throws like he's got two left arms. He tells him not to aim the ball, but just to imagine it going through. This parallels how a Green Lantern creates their constructs through their imagination and will, and I love how John starts to tell the kid that he learned this by his dad shooting apples off his head, like it's a totally normal thing. But John is interrupted by the arrival of Noah's grandmother, who is, dun dun dun, the lady John shagged last night. We learn that she's called Zoe Macon and is the wife of the alien wacko cowboy. Ooh, and it's gonna get awkward. Or maybe it won't, which we'll talk about in a bit. But we then cut to after the party where Macon walks John and Hal to their car and tells Hal that he talked to the sheriff so he can question the alien suspect. He also makes it very obvious that he knows that John shagged his wife, which was a bit weird.
Nothing better than eating off another man's grill.
But he's also kind of cool with it. I don't know, but yeah, Macon is for sure a bad guy, I know that. Now there have been some rumours flying about that William Macon could actually be William Hand from the comics. Also known as the Black Hand, he's a classic Green Lantern villain who became obsessed with harnessing the power of the ring. He creates a device to drain the power from Hal's and later gains the ability to drain people's life force directly from them. This happened after he was experimented on by aliens, and this could be what they're doing in the show. Again, DC has rebooted its comic universe a couple of times at this point, but in Black Hand's original origin, he grew up in a very wealthy family, but ended up hating them and used his resources to turn to a life of crime, which I feel fits with at least the little bit we know about William Macon so far. Despite him just looking after the property as well, it's clear that Macon is very well connected and clearly obsessed with aliens. However, we see Macon is also interested in the Green Lanterns, as Billy mentioned that he was a huge fan of Hal. Kerry even said he had papers on him, and I think it's interesting how he calls the ring a weapon of mass destruction when he first meets Hal. Now, this kind of hinted to me that he's not impressed by the ring's power, but more so afraid of it. If Macon is indeed playing a version of the Black Hand from the comics, I think he's going to be after those rings and could see them as a threat to humanity despite the Lantern's job being to protect Earth. This could be why it's missing at the end, and Macon may have been the one who's taken it. Plus, we've already seen his wife cozying up to John, and it goes back to those very specific questions that she asked about at the bar. Now, I feel like Zoe may be playing an even bigger game in all of this, but if she told Macon anything about what John had told her that night, then he knows that if he takes out Hal, Earth will be left with its untrained backup, which is not good. We then see Hal and John arrive at the police station to question the suspect, who we learn from Sheriff Kerry is supposedly just a random truck driver named Waylon Sanders. Kerry believes this and has checked him out and knows from his x-ray that he has human organs. However, John and Hal aren't so convinced, and they say there's currently 14 species with the technology to pass as humans. And it may be some Kryptonian invasion shit, but it doesn't seem that strong. But everything from x-rays to MRIs and blood work, that's all been done, and it's planted the idea in our heads that aliens could be anyone. And I'm looking at you, mustache Jason Ritter. Despite having no way to prove that he's alien, Hal's convinced he can get him to confess, and he leaves John to give him his next lesson. Also, love how when Hal is going to the interrogation room, he tells John to stay back, and you can see John's reflection on the two-way mirror, which makes it look like he's sitting across from the suspect. This symbolizes how John will one day take Hal's place and be the one on the other side of the glass. We also see John is somewhat of an artist, and he makes a sketch of the suspect, which is actually pretty good. Now, we haven't really learned much about John yet, but in the comics, he is an architect and not an artist. So this feels more like it could be a nod to another Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner. In the comics, he was actually a freelance artist before acquiring his ring, and most of his constructs are based around his artistic imagination. As Hal enters the interrogation room, he then just starts shooting the shit with the guy and asks him where he's from and why he came out of the football game. He says it's because he's just a big fan of football, and Hal starts quizzing him on the Nebraska football facts. I'm a LARPer, I'll admit it. He then gets them all right. However, things change when Hal asks him what the name of Harry Potter's school was, and the guy's completely stumped. Also, I love how he goes, Harry Potter, the boy wizard. It reveals that while aliens are really good at studying up for their specific roles, they neglect to learn common things that most humans would know.
Snape kills Dumbledore!
Now, that was pretty clever, but Kerry is still unimpressed. She asks John how he can work with someone that he doesn't respect, and says that Hal isn't fearless but lonely. Also, I know it's my job to literally overanalyze these things, but it seems to me that Kerry is kind of trying to get John to shit-talk Hal here. Notice how Kerry's reflection hovers right over the alien suspect as well, but we can't see John's reflection on the other side. It's almost like she's been interrogated by Hal. Now, I might be reaching here, but this possibly could be hinting at Harry being one of these undercover aliens herself. This would explain why she's been trying so hard to get rid of Hal and keep him away from the Macons. But that Noah kid, he was a little too polite, wasn't he, now I think about it? And he's also a star football player when he grows up. He's using his alien powers for profit. Now, if Kerry does turn out to be an alien, I don't think she's involved with whatever Macon's planning and is possibly just trying to hide herself and play sheriff on Earth, which could even build off her line of,
I can't do this again.
when she first met Hal. Back to Hal's interrogation, the suspect tries to scramble as Hal continues to ask him pop culture facts. He drops the act though after giving Hal a Wikipedia description of Barack Obama. He then says that if he was an alien who took the time to hide himself and learn about stupid human shit like football, it would be for a very important reason. This is a reason that would need to be kept secret from an intergalactic peace organization because it doesn't involve peace, but instead involves war. I was sitting there like, I'd be getting up and out this room at this point. He then says that if he was taken by such an organization, he would have to take drastic measures to ensure his mission wasn't revealed. The alien suspect then reveals, hypothetically of course, that he has a biometric neutron device woven into his skeleton that he can activate with just a thought. Hal then says that he can just contain it with his ring, but the suspect asks how much power he has left in it. He also knows that he's been in town for the last 48 hours and that the Lanterns have to recharge their ring. So the alien knows ball. Now in the comics, and I'm guessing the show too, a Green Lantern ring basically has to be recharged every 24 hours. So this alien, knowing that shows whoever this guy is or who his people are, they've tangoed with the Lanterns before and have probably already been watching Hal. Tired of the games, Hal's ready to get the party started and he asks if they're talking or exploding, and the alien then provokes him by starting to recite the Green Lantern's oath, which does get to Hal and he throws the guy up against the wall saying,
Harry Potter went to Hogwarts, you ignorant alien fuck.
Which is basically going to be probably the summary of my Harry Potter breakdowns. If we do it, I don't know if we're going to do it. It seems like a fucking nightmare. However, the alien suspect then just gives a chuckle and says he's here for vengeance before his arse starts bleeping. Hal then throws him across the room and contains him in a bubble before getting a well-deserved told you so. We then jump ahead 10 years to 2026 where we meet an older John driving into Rushville to meet Sheriff Kerry. John's also rocking a sick goatee, which references his Jon Stewart look in the animated Justice League series. We can also see that something bad must have happened there over the last 10 years, as Jon drives past what I think is the Macon Ranch, but it's now been completely destroyed. Could be wrong on this, so I need you guys to confirm it. And I did also wonder if it might have been the police station, but I did double check that. The explosion wasn't that bad. It's still standing, so it wasn't that. Jon and Kerry also seem to be glad to see each other, with Jon asking about Noah, who Kerry says is now the team's quarterback. Sorry, he wasn't playing in the big leagues, but yeah, I was rambling there. That was the first thing that came to mind. But I guess Jon's lessons really stuck with him, and interestingly, there's no mention of Billy or William. So Kerry will, of course, come around to their side by the end of all this, but I'm still not convinced she's not an alien. We then see the reason for this little reunion as they make their way onto the field, and we see Hal sitting in the stands. However, this time Hal isn't just taking in the sights, but he is in fact dead. His body's frozen solid, and the ring is also gone. We then pan away and hear the song Knievel by Scud Mountain Boys, which takes us to the credits. And what a way to finish the first episode. Also, notice how they kind of toy with us here, as we can't see if Jon has the ring now. They cover his right hand with Hal's when he's checking his body, and we also have to remember that this would be a year after the events of Superman, where Guy Gardner is the current Green Lantern of Earth. This episode made it pretty clear a few times that Earth can only have one Green Lantern, but maybe they expanded the roster. If not though, we do get a bit of a double mystery here with who killed Hal and what Jon's current status in the Corps is. Now Hal has died in the comics a few times before, but it was way more dramatic. Most famously, after he was possessed by the fear entity known as Parallax in the 90s, he ultimately sacrificed himself by using all his powers to reignite the sun, which is a bit more bombastic than this. So this seems like a new storyline for the show, but I'm sure we'll get some more clues as the season goes on that will help us figure this one out. But right now, I am pretty stumped, so hit me with those best theories in the comments. But that brings us to the end of Lanterns episode 1, and I've got to say, I was a little on the fence about this going into it, and did kind of struggle with the pacing at points. I am expecting the season to ramp things up, but I wasn't initially hooked by the main mystery in the episode, and it was only by the final scene that I was like, alright, this is very intriguing, I will watch this next week. However, I will say that Aaron Pierre is just fantastic as Jon Stewart, and I love the dynamic he has with Carl Chandler's Hal Jordan. That sort of contempt mixed in with respect, it just makes the dynamic, I think the relationship between the pair, that's going to be what the show's built upon. I also really love the True Detective vibes of the episode. They've been very open about saying that's an influence, with that apparently even being what was in the original pitch. But it helps to lean more into the cop aspect of the Green Lanterns, and makes them different to like Superman and Supergirl. The first episode also sets up things pretty well for the mystery to continue, and as someone who likes Lindelof's work, yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. It kind of felt like the police chief hanging scene at the end of the Watchmen episode 1, and yeah, if you've seen that series, you know it opens up quite a lot of things. But I don't know, something about it feels a bit drab, especially for a premiere where it's supposed to really grab you and suck you in for the next 8 weeks. I know the show has been criticised for how dull it looks, and yeah, it's kind of impressive. They've managed to do a Green Lantern show, and the only green I saw in it was the basket at the taco place. I'm guessing it will open up though, or at least I hope it does. But I don't know. I found elements of this kind of boring. Is the only word I can think of. But it is early days, so I don't want to be too harsh. It's well acted. Lindelof, again, I like him. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's also clear the show is pulling from lots of different Green Lantern comics instead of adapting a specific run or arc, so I am excited to see more of what they do with the source material and how this builds into the future of the DCU. As I'm sure you guys have seen from the videos, I'm still a bit funny on the DCU. Yeah, they haven't quite won me round yet, so we'll see how this series goes. But I am interested to see where it takes things next. And yeah, I'll hopefully see you back next week. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And if you think Hal is really dead, is Sheriff Kerry an alien? Is Noah an alien? Who's an alien? Is Billy Macon an alien? Is William Macon an alien? Are they all aliens? Comment below and let me know. If you want to keep up to date with all the updates as well, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers on Instagram. Did you know as well that I'm about to run a half marathon for the Newcastle Cats and Dogs Shelter? The way we're raising money for this is if you go to the membership below, click the join button. It's 99 cents a month, and every week you'll get early access to a video before anyone else. And then at the end of the month, All that money gets collected up that all you guys have donated, and that gets given to the charity as I run that half marathon. So yes, please check that out. It's a great cause, and thank you so much for sitting through the video. Now, if you want something else to watch, we've got a breakdown of House of the Dragon on screen right now. There's also some other stuff there too, and hopefully I'll see you next week. If not though, huge thank you for sitting through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.